Here we go. Evening everyone, and welcome to Weekends Web App. We are on day 0B and we're going to be working through build tools today. Evening everyone, and welcome. Sorry about that. Alright, so what we're going to do is work through our build tools, essentially get our environment up and running. If we harken back to yesterday, we had this little setup where we were able to create some HTML pages, and we started with a little bit of the technologies that we're actually going to be writing. So we're going to be using Jade, or Pug rather, to write our HTML, and we're going to be using Less to write our CSS. So we made a little file for that, just to demonstrate what it's capable of, and then we compiled it, and we compiled it manually, if you'll remember. So we did stuff like ran, if we jump into client, so to run Pug, or say to actually run Less, we would run to node modules, into their bin folder, and then, still forgetting what I'm talking about. All right, here we go. So we would run that, and we would put that on app.css. And that would render our file, and we'd be good to go. Obviously, we don't want to be having to do that manually every single time we want to build things. And this is where you start to go down the rocky road of front-end build tooling. There are lots of build tools out there. Some of them try to do literally everything. Some of them only do a little bit, or some of them, they all have different opinions about how you want to work. And some people try to roll with just a scripts setup. So there's this little aspect of the package JSON file that comes with your node package, the one that you get when you run npm init, and that script section allows you to sort of run certain things. So say we wanted to do this, do that operation that I just described, but we want to do it at the npm level. So what we could do is we could say have something for dev, or let's say build, and then we run less c, and we run it on client slash app.less, and then we output it to client slash app.css. So if we do that, and then we back off, we should be able to npm run build, and it will run that command. And just to prove that it actually works, what we'll do is we'll kick on over to, so if we list out our client folder, you'll see app.css right here. So if we delete that with rm client app.css, oh wait, typo, right, there we go. So we list it now, we can't see it, and I'll go npm run build, and there you go. So our CSS file is back. So we know that we can run things like that, and people do propose that you can do a setup that essentially just builds together all these different scripts, and off you go. The problem I've found in practice with that, I mean, it's a nice idea simply because it can be simple, but once it gets to a certain point, your tooling expands to a certain point, and it doesn't give you any room to grow in complexity in a way that's easy to manage. So I end up sort of taking a different tack with this. In a lot of ways, the thing that I use to do building is kind of old and busted, but it's predictable, so I like it. And it's called Gulp. And what this will allow us to do is essentially set up our Gulp file, which will run all the tasks that we need to do. We can run one task, we can run all of them. It's probably easier to just jump on into it than it is to really describe it. So that's pretty much what I'm going to do. So I need globally accessible, I need the Gulp CLI, and then as a dependency, I need Gulp itself. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to bring Gulp in, and then we're going to start writing ourselves a Gulp file. So if I go, we can use yarn and npm interchangeably, but let's go npm install global, and we're going to install the Gulp CLI. I might already have it, but let's just give it a try. All right, there we go. And we also need a development version, so we're going to go save dev as a development dependency, and that's going to be for gulp itself. All right, she's a bit old, but that's all right, because no one else is going to be running this file other than us, so there's really not a lot of security vulnerability in that regard. Now what we're going to do, just clear this window. So what we're going to do is we're going to set ourselves up what's called the gulp file. So we'll start off with just a single file, but eventually we will make this a little more complicated than that. So that gulp file allows us to run gulp, and what you'll see is gulp task default is not in your gulp file. So we haven't given it any instructions, so we can't really do anything with it. So from here, we're going to decide a few things. So we can't just plonk all of our files into client here. So of all these files here, only one of, only two of them, actually only three of them are sort of output. So yeah, only three of them are code we actually want to write. So the JavaScript until we've got TypeScript, that's code we want to write. And we've got the less, and we've got the pug. We don't actually want the HTML and the CSS in there. We want them in some sort of output folder that will let us do what we want to do. Essentially have a safe place that we can serve and say that's going to be where our web app lives. Because when we start off this web app, what we're going to be doing is just focusing on the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. We're not going to have any clever stuff on our server side at all, other than giving the user files. So this is the way we need to run things. We need to build those files and put them somewhere so that they can be given to, well, us to start off with, and then eventually an end user. So what we're going to do is we're going to have some sort of build directory. And I don't technically need to make this because Gulp will do this, but I just want to explain the structure. So, and we're under here, we're going to have a folder called web. And this is where our web build is going to go. And so that's going to be our target for the Gulp file. So if we jump over to the Gulp file, we need Gulp. And this is going to be stock standard JavaScript here. I'm not going to do anything particularly fancy with it. I kind of, like, you can technically use TypeScript files or CoffeeScript files or whatever and go through some mental hoops to get to this point. But I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to avoid that. And I'm going to just stick with standard JavaScript. It's really not that hard when you're working with simple files like these. I'm going to start by making a config variable as well that's going to house things like the destination folder and that kind of thing. So that way I don't have to think too hard about where everything is, and if I need to move things down, reorganize things down the track, it'll be easy to see how that's all wired up in this configuration system. So we're going to have paths, and we'll say that the build output goes to build/web, and client source comes from client. And this might be over engineering to start off with, but I'm not too fussed about it. All right. So now that we've got that, we need to be able to run Gulp tasks, but we also need something to do with those tasks. I'll demonstrate a simple thing with the scripts first, simply because we've got a JavaScript file. Say we wanted to move that JavaScript file straight to the build folder. Let's see how we could go about doing that. And I'm pretty much doing this off of memory, and sometimes that doesn't always work out, but we'll see how we go. I might be able to get it in one go. So Gulp tasks are made by essentially building a function and then doing something within that function after calling Gulp task here. So what this will allow me to do is run Gulp. So there's no default task, but if I go Gulp scripts, oops, it will run that file, and then it will just immediately finish. Just to prove the point. There we go. You can see our little console log out there. Obviously, that's not what we want to have happen, though. We want something else to happen. So what we're going to do is we're going to source something. And that something is going to be the JavaScript files that are inside the client folder. So we're going to go config.paths.client_source plus a slash, and then we're going to star.js. And this essentially means every single JavaScript file it can find underneath the client directory. And then this is where Gulp starts to allow you to do something with its output. And you essentially get a pipe, and it travels through a range of steps, and then eventually comes out the other end. This time, however, we're not actually going to do anything with the file. We're just going to output it to the build directory. So we go run gulp.dest destination in the pipe, and that destination is going to be config.paths.buildweb. Right. So now if I go gulp scripts and I check in the build web file, you'll see our JavaScript. Great. All right. However, we need to do more if we're going to get our less in there, because we don't want the less to just go over there like normal. We want the less to go over there like as CSS. So it needs to go through some degree of processing. So what we're going to do is grab ourselves a few Gulp plugins. So let's have a fish around. So we need Gulp less. I believe this is the one we're after. Not looking great at the moment. All right, there we go. Load it properly. Okay, so Gulp less, a less plugin for Gulp. So that'll be probably pretty much the version we need. Okay, so let's install ourselves that. So that's yarn. So we're doing yarn this time. So we're adding the developer dependency with yarn. Gulp -less. Let it do its thing. And it's done. Right. So we need to require that. And now we need to start our task. And this time we're going to make our task, and we're going to, rather than targeting every single file we can find, we're instead going to just target the main or the root style that we want to use. So I'm just going to call this task styles. And what we're going to do is return gulp.source config.paths.client_source. And then I believe we're looking at app.less. Okay, so now that we've got that, we need to run it through some level of processing. And if I just take a look over at the documentation here, it sort of shows us what we need to do. We've got this less point here. So we're going to use that and pretty much just go hog wild on that. Yeah, let's go. So pipe less, and we probably don't need to give it any variables at all. We can just give it, just work it like that. And then we need to put that output somewhere. That output should already be renamed by the plugin. So we should just be able to output it directly to gulp.dest config.paths.build.web. Build web rather. Right, so if I now go gulp styles, I made a mistake. Why is that? Oh, that's right. Yes, I made a mistake. So I should have actually required gulp less. There we go. Do it again. Less version 3.0.4. Oh no. This is going to give us some problems. And you're introduced to why JavaScript tooling gives me a lot of grief. Because sometimes you think things that should work for you, well, they don't work for you. So let's see if there's anything else for gulp less. Published 4 months ago. This is interesting. Why does it not work anymore? All right. Well, for the sake of learning, what we're going to do for now is we're going to back off on the top on the version of less that we're on. It's unfortunate that we have to do that so quick in the game, but I don't want to let this get in the way of us just showing the build tools. So I'm going to work through things by just downgrading less to a lower version. I don't really need mandatorily 3.0.4, so I'm just going to pull back a bit. So let me see if I can find an older version. I reckon we'll be fine on 3.0.0, so let's give that one a try. So I'm going to back off to 3.0.0. Let's give that a try. So I'll just run yarn, and hopefully it should pick up on what I just told it. Not supported either. Alright, so we're going to have to back off to 2.7.3. That's fine. Cool. Alright, so we're working now. That's not ideal, and I do understand it doesn't exactly put web development in a good light, but I do have to just truck on, and unfortunately, really, we're plumbers. And yes, we deal with complicated concepts sometimes, but so do plumbers. And unfortunately, plumbers still have to work in raw sewage sometimes too. So anyway, what we're going to be doing with that, now that we can run gulp styles, we should be able to see our CSS file in build. And there we go. Now the reason we're picking that main point is because we want to be able to do imports with this less file eventually. So that way that we can segment all of our CSS into various places. Let me demonstrate quickly what I mean by that. So we want, say, client dependency.less, and we're going to put, say, a color on the time, right? So time is going to have a color of blue. If we go at import dependency.less, or do /dependency.less, should be well behaved. So I can run gulp styles right now, and that will turn out exactly as I want it to, with only one CSS file and that import coming in right where I want it to. Now the alternative is if we told our gulp file to get every single less file it could find, we would end up with something a little bit different. So if we do that instead, we would end up something which has app CSS with the import in it as well, and then dependency.css. So it's not quite what we want if we did it that way. So that's why we're not doing it that way. All right, so let me undo that. All right, so now that we've got styles, what we also want to do is we want to run pug. So let me jump on over here. Hopefully gulp pug will be a little bit better behaved. Published 2 months ago, so it shouldn't be that out of date. All right, so I'm going to have gulp pug. I haven't actually installed it yet, so let's do that. We'll go yarn add development dependency gulp pug. Lovely. All right. So what we want to do is we want to take pretty much any pug file. This time we do want every single pug file to be sort of compiled over. That may change in the future. We might ignore certain directories. Maybe they're meant to be reusable parts or something like that. But for now, we will just do every single pug file we can get our hands on. Because the truth is we're actually not going to be doing that much work with HTML. So in fact, just to show really what I think of them, they're going to be called containers, because that's what they are. All they are is a container that eventually the app loads into, and then the JavaScript takes over from there. They're really not your core place where a lot of your coding is taking place. You need them to get started, but you don't need them for everything. So our containers are going to be run through gulp pug. Do I need to put anything in there? Yeah, I can probably get by without any. Sorry about that. We can probably get by without any sort of what's the word I'm looking for? We can get by without any options here, and we should be able to run containers with reckless abandon. Gulp containers, and there we go, and we should have ourselves a folder, and that's great and all, but that doesn't get us quite where we want it to just yet. So I can chuck that into the browser here, and we can see it, we can inspect it. Let me put this on the side, there we go. So we can inspect it, we can do all sorts of lovely things, we can check this out, and we can see the changes that are happening as they happen, and that's all fine and dandy. But we also want to be running from a server rather than from a file root, because it's not quite as convenient to run with, and it also means that a lot of the behaviors aren't going to be what we expect in a real proper web situation, because a lot of permissions are removed once you're working from this file root sort of scenario. So, what are we going to do about that? Well, we need to run a little server, don't we? And luckily, we can run one of them servers through Gulp. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go grab Gulp Connect, which gives me a way to run ourselves a server. So let's just give that a crack, okay? So we're going to go yarn add development dependency Gulp Connect. Here we go. So now that we've got all that, let me clear that, all that out of the way. So now that we've got all that, we've got to pick up Connect here. And we'll drop on down here, and it pretty much just run things as the documentation says here. So got this development server, and it runs with that. So we're going to make a task called dev server, rather. And we're going to return well, actually, we don't need to return because it's never going to stop until we Control-C out of the process. So the root is going to be config.paths.buildweb, and live reload, we'll set that to true. Live reload is essentially a convenience that allows it to automatically refresh things as files change. It will probably do something a bit more sophisticated than that eventually, get some sort of hot reloading happening, but I don't want to sort of overcomplicate things, and eventually we're going to have to get into the world of JavaScript, and that might not be as much fun as it sounds. So let's run this just to verify the point. So if we go gulp dev server, okay, so it says here that it's starting server, it finished dev server. It's not just exited out because this thing will persist forever until I Control-C. And you can see here it says the server started at HTTP localhost 8080. So if I copy link and pop it over here, now we've got access to the same app, but now it's inside a bit more of a proper scope. So that way we can start to do things that sort of emulate how it would actually behave in a real world scenario. So that's good, but we do have to tie this all together, because at the moment I still need to run individual tasks. I can't just go and change, say, index.pug and expect good things to happen, because what will happen is I'll do the work here. I'll go weekends web app 2, and after I've done that, it won't appear unless I go gulp containers. Oop, I didn't like that because I made a typo. Alright. There we go. Okay. I also made a mistake in my pug file in oversimplifying things. That's meant to be indented like that. Alright, here we go. So if I run gulp containers, now we've got what we want. But we wanted that to happen without us working with it. And really, this is the ideal of our development tooling, is we want to run one single command and end up with everything working for us and us just ready to visit localhost 8080 or wherever it is and do the work that we want to do. So we're going to work towards being able to do just that. So let's have a crack. What do we need in order for that to happen? Well, we need to watch certain files, and when those files change, we need to run a task of some description. In addition to that, we want it to start up our dev server. So, in the interest of all of that, let's make a gulp task called dev, and we're going to try and set up all these operations. Now, gulp comes with Gulp Watch. Eventually, we will not use Gulp Watch because Gulp Watch becomes undependable at certain levels of scale that I don't much like. So I end up using a little thing called Chokidar. But for now, Gulp Watch will work just fine. So let's start off down that road, and we'll change things up when we get around to it. All right, Gulp Watch. So if we run Gulp Watch on a particular sort of a string, then we'll be able to tell it what tasks to run in response to that. And you can see that down in the docs just here. So what that's going to be is we're going to run Gulp Watch, and what we're going to be watching is, we'll start off with our containers first. So config.paths.client source plus so pretty much all a matcher on every single one of our pug files. And eventually we might bring these variables together so it's a little more terse, but for now this will do. So we've got that path, and we're going to add on to it, and then we're going to tell it what task we want to run. So we want to run containers when that happens. All right, so that's the pug files dealt with. So what's next? We want to deal with styles. Oopsie daisy. All right, there we go. So now we've got less, and we can do the JS as well, because we want it to track all changes on JS, just to be clear there. So that's why that's got star.star there, or star/star. And here we want to do scripts. So anytime any JavaScript changes in the client, we want it to do that action there. Now, in addition to that, we want it to run the gulp task of server, of dev server. So I'm pretty sure, yeah, we can just do gulp.run, I believe. Let me double check that. I was sure there was a gulp.run. Gulp.start. Yeah. For some reason, not documented. How about that? All right, gulp start dev server. I'm pretty certain that works from my experience. So anyway, let's try out this gulp dev. All right, there we go. See it run dev server. It didn't actually run any of these things yet though, because we haven't changed anything. So say we did change something. I went weekends web app free. You can see here, suddenly it sprung to life and says starting containers, finish containers in a small amount of time. And if I refresh here, it is good as gold. Now, what we want is that for it actually to scrub clean that build file before we actually do anything in it, just so that if there's any old files in there or anything like that, like we can be sure that it's a clean build. So what we might add to this is some sort of clean function, and luckily gulp gives us something, well, rather there's a gulp plugin out there. So we're going to do just that. So yeah, this will do. Delete files folder. Oh great, they've got a recipe instead. Yeah, that'll do. We'll do that instead. Okay, they've got a suggestion, and they don't think it should be a plugin, and there was this ideological purity thing going on. But anyway, we're going to follow that. So what we're going to do is install yarn add d del. The interesting thing about this is, while I did just sort of make fun of it, it is actually a very it's a good strength of Gulp that you can pretty much put JavaScript wherever you need it to exist within your tasks. And this makes it a good candidate for a general purpose way to glue together all of the various tasks that you have to run. Like if I need it to run a particular way, I know that I can do that. I can eventually figure out the right collection of things that needs to happen to arrive at a final destination that works for me as a developer. So there's a lot of benefit to it in that regard. As I said, even though it's old and busted, I know how to work with it. So it's good in that sense. So if we clean web, then that task, oopsie daisy, what am I even doing? All right, make a function. And we are going to return del. And what directory are we going to delete? We're going to delete config.paths.buildWeb. In fact, we don't really need the indentation here. All right, so let's say we run this task now, just to test that it will actually do it. So we'll run gulp clean web. Okay, so according to it did something. Let's check that for sure. Okay, build directory is empty, so it must have worked. So let's say we run ourselves, and this is a way to set up dependencies where certain tasks need to run before this dev task starts. We're going to run clean web. Now I wonder how the dependencies work. Let me double check this one. Now let's just wing it for the moment. We'll see how it goes. So I want to run clean web, and then I want to run scripts, styles, and containers. There will be better ways to run this in the future, but for the now, let's just say that we're going to do that. All right. So now when we run gulp dev, okay, so it ran clean web. Unfortunately, it finished clean web and then probably started these ones as well. So there is some undesirable concurrency happening there, and it might mean that certain files won't be there when we expect them to be. It's not happening right now, but it is a potential thing that could happen. And so what we want to do is we want to potentially make sure that that happens first. So what we'll do instead, give me one moment. Yeah, what we'll do instead is we'll make these free tasks sort of dependent on the rest of them. So what we're going to do is make a sort of a smaller task called gulp.task build, and it's going to rely on clean web function, and then after that it's going to return gulp.start, and I'm aware I'm bringing this to the bottom of the screen, it's fine. All right, clean, and then we're going to bring in scripts. Hell, I'll be better off if I pull that out and X. Right, here we go. So now we've chucked it in here, and if we return that and make this task instead build, we might end up with something a little bit cleaner in terms of the order that everything happens in. So let's give that a shot. So we'll clear it, we'll run gulp dev. Okay, so here we can see it finished clean web first. It started all of these, finished them. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually wait till build's done, but that doesn't actually hurt us right now, so we're all good. So what that means is now it will build and immediately set things up exactly as we left them, which is good. And it will also remove any wasted files or anything like that, like any files that shouldn't belong there. Now, one last thing we can add to this little setup before we get straight onto JavaScript is we could get in a little bit of live reloading. So let's just do that. So if we look back at the documentation for Gulp Connect, you'll see a bit further down, you'll see some reload concepts here. And the idea is the file comes out and then we use connect reload to tell it, hey, this file that went through this pipeline, that's new. do something about it so that you're now reloaded. So that's what we're going to do. It's going to be quite straightforward in practice, and I mean it's a fairly rough sort of solution for what we need, but it'll do. It'll help us out. So let's give it a crack. So we're just going to put, after the destination happens, we're going to go connect.reload, and that's going to call the live reload functionality. And we're going to do that for CSS and for the JavaScript. And this will probably be a hard reload every time. It means it won't replace the file and keep the web page running. You'll see the timer reset every time this happens, but I mean, it's still something. So let's have a crack at that. So we still need to restart Gulp in order to do this. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to pop that over there, and we're going to bring Gulp Connect over here. In fact, what I'm going to do instead of what I just said is I'm going to put this guy down at the bottom. So we have the browser window up our top right. We have our terminal, our code editing, and then we have Gulp down the bottom here. So let's just show how that all comes together. So now we've got it reloading, and the timer's been kicking along for a while there. We're going to refresh first, because we haven't got the live reload server fully connected. Well, actually it might have been, but anyway, let's just carry on. So first of all, let's test changes to the HTML. Okay, you can see there, it kicked over a live reload straight away. And again, and again. And you'll see as well that the timer reset every single time that happened. Very good. Okay, now how about app.js? Let's say we wanted the timer to start at 10. Yep, there we go. And you can see here, it reset every single time we did this because it doesn't know how to pick things up. So it just does the most obvious thing and refreshes the browser, which is all good. And then finally, the less file. All right, let's check the dependency. Oh. Ah, that's right. Dependency, my bad. I'm forgetting my bindings. All right, let's change that color to red. Okay, so this is the one thing it can reload on the spot because it knows that what it can do is just take. So the functionality of it is essentially here. So you can see this, well, maybe you can't because it's really small. Anyway, I'll copy paste this path. So it has this path here. Oops. Yeah, this path right here. So what it has is a big path, and it has live reload. And I'm going to hazard a guess, that's most likely a Unix timestamp or something close. Let me double check that, just out of curiosity's sake. Yeah, pretty close. So that's a Unix timestamp that gives us a exact time that this file changed, and that will keep on kicking up every single time I make a change to this file, and it will just reload it every time, and it can do it without actually having to reset, which is pretty handy. And honestly, CSS being able to reload, it does give you some freedom to work through your problem. That said though, these days, and this is not a point of humble brag or anything like that, this is just the way I work. Once you get the HTML in place and you've got everything sort of structured right, you can do your first pass of writing the CSS almost blind, and then you do other work inside the code. You can jump in here and you can actually start to change things in a potentially more interactive way. You can really work with adding rules and just experimenting in the browser, and then you translate those variables into here. But I mean, that'll become more clearly demonstrated once we actually start working like that. For the moment, it's not a big deal, so I wouldn't worry about it too much. Anyway, I'm going to split all this back up. So I'll put him back over on this monitor, and we'll close up our task runner for now. So what have we got now? We have a little build system that allows us to build our web app into a folder, and we're also running it from a server rather than straight from our file system. In fact, let me fix up that gray as well. I'm not a big fan of it right now. That's way too dark. Let's do that, eh? Oh no, that's right, I killed the server. That's better. Okay, a little bit brighter. All right, so we've got the server running, and we're almost all of the way there for the very basic build tooling that we need. Eventually, we'll start jumping back and forth between our tooling as we have particular needs for our process. We build more things to make that tooling more appropriate. And this is an important thing that I guess it's really hard to keep track of in the JavaScript community because there's so much going on with the ecosystem. We're constantly building new and better tools, or new and different tools sometimes, and that's an important thing to keep in mind. And sometimes you can let your tools rule your process. And I'm a big believer that the process that you desire, the tools should fit that. And we're always going to be trying to make our tools fit our ideal process. And there'll be a bit of back and forth there, especially as we start to get into actually building the nitty-gritty of our UI. We'll need better things from our tools in order to make it possible for us to do good work. But anyway, for now, we're just going to keep on charging along and get us some JavaScript on the page so that we can go from there. And I mean, technically we do have some JavaScript, but I want to be writing TypeScript, and that involves a bit more work. And also I want to have to be able to bundle all this code together. So that requires some sort of bundler. There's a bunch of different ones that came out there. Way back when was Browserify, that sort of led the charge. And then after that was Webpack. Webpack was like the new hotness, and it's pretty much the one to beat these days. And it talks about bringing every single thing you've got together and then bundling it. I don't like to do that. And this is probably a good point for me to make a commit and just record what I've already done. And then after that, I'm going to rant just a little bit about what I believe is the right way to approach things. Okay, we've got untracked files. We need to actually clean up this just a little bit. So I'm just going to add our build folder to the git ignore. We don't actually want to commit any of those files. So the build folder is something that Git, our version control system, is meant to ignore. All right, so we have a new gulp file. We have plenty of new dependencies, and we've deleted certain files and added them in. That all looks good to me. So let's just carry on. And this is going to be day 0b. Set up gulp tooling for CSS for less JavaScript and Pug plus dev server. That's what we did. And we'll send that up into the cloud. GitHub can look after it. Right. Okay, so what else do we need? Well, this is where we get into the realm of JavaScript. And as I said, there was a ranting coming. I'm going to try and not take too long, but here is essentially the crux of my argument and why I don't like this model that's purported here. And the big one is like, you've already seen one point where I was like, oh no, I have a problem. I can't build something because of a version mismatch or something's not working quite right. And that was an easily solved problem because I could just roll back a version and I'll figure something out that's a bit more permanent so that I can actually get less version 3.0.4 eventually. But the whole point is that was an isolated incident. I could isolate that just to my styles. I do not like the idea of all of my builds, like every technology that I use, being sewn up in a very particular build process, where if I need to change one thing, I need to change all of the things. It's not very appealing to me. I don't like if a bundler is responsible for every single thing, because there's some weird and esoteric things, and it ends up being this JavaScript is the center of the world. JavaScript is the center of the world mindset, which I just don't subscribe to. I like to write CSS when I'm writing CSS. I like to write JavaScript when I'm writing JavaScript or TypeScript or whatever. And I like to write HTML when I'm writing HTML. There is obviously a caveat to that because JavaScript renders a lot of HTML. But when it comes to actually writing the code, I like to write the code separate. I like to keep it all together as features and whatnot, but I do not like to have all of my build tools doing every single thing in a way that can't be easily uncoupled. And I mean, honestly, this is the way I approach writing code in general. Because if you try to make everything dependent on one another, all it takes for one thing to break, and suddenly you're in a lot of problems. You've got to work through your problems, and unfortunately, with the ecosystem as it is, you just can't expect things to work like magic. Even the newest things with the best promises just do not work like magic, because with new comes problems, and those eventually shake out. But if you keep on updating, you want to keep up with the latest and greatest, you can't hard couple all your dependencies. So anyway, rant over. Now we're going to build some JavaScript, but we're going to change out to TypeScript while we do this. So where do we start with this? Okay, so we have our app.js file, and we're going to change over to TypeScript. Okay, so what's the best way to do this? I'll just do it, I guess. That makes sense. All right, so client app.js. I'm just going to make this a wee bit smaller. And on this side, we're going to have client app.ts. Just to show you what it's going to look like with TypeScript. It's not going to look that much different, really. About the only thing I'm going to really add is I'm going to add a type for this one. It can actually infer the type, so it probably doesn't even need to do that. But we can start to use things like our let. I like let const because it's not changing. And that's about it. Okay, so that's some TypeScript, but we need to compile that. So while we're at it, we'll delete. Oh, you're not going to see that. So I'm going to delete the JS file. So now we are without JavaScript. And if we run ourselves our dev server, we will notice that no JavaScript is running. So now we need to figure out some level of tooling that's going to work with us here. And what we're going to do is link together Gulp and Webpack to do what we need to do. And this is going to be sort of our first sort of less trivial aspect of setting up our Gulp file. And we'll see how we go for time, because unfortunately there's only 15 minutes left. But let's see how we go. So when we bring all this together, I believe we're going to need Webpack Stream to do the job. Yep, that'll be the one. Okay, so we're going to go Webpack Stream. So we need that. We're going to go yarn, add a development dependency, Webpack Stream. We're also going to need Webpack itself. What else do we need? We also need TypeScript. And I'll see if we need a Webpack TypeScript loader as well. I very much imagine we do. Yeah, TS loader. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so now that we've done that, where we're going to see the most change is in this scripts file. So I'm going to make a config file for my JavaScript, and then I'm going to pass it over to Gulp when I do it. And the only reason I'm going to do a bit more work with this config file is simply because there is more work involved in a Webpack config. So we sort of just got to roll with the punches here. So the default sort of thing for it is webpack.config.js. So we're going to go export that. This is a Node syntax thing that basically says if anyone requires this file, this is what we're going to give them. So module.exports is what we give whoever requests this thing. So we're going to start off in a way that's sort of naive, and then we'll build this up over time. So we're going to start with mode being development, and the entry point Actually, no, this sucks. We're not going to do that for the moment. We're going to do it all in the gulp file because that's what we can do. Alright, so we're going to webpack stream. Require webpack stream. That is not correct. It's webpack hyphen stream. Alright, what next? We need TypeScript loader. We don't actually need the TypeScript loader because that's going to appear in our config. And this is where things get, like, again, things get a little harder to work through just because there's just an awful lot of stuff there. So our entry point is app.ts. And we're going to pipe it through webpack stream. Webpack. And we've got to bring in webpack as well by the looks of it. Yep, okay. And then apparently we can just put it over to the destination. So we'll see how that goes. No config at all. It'll probably freak out, but I'm not entirely sure about that. Let's give that a try. Little steps get us there eventually. So if we do gulp strips, okay, so it did something. And out of here came a whole lot of stuff that will eventually have our code in it. Yeah, there's where it picks up time, but it's not so great to look at, and it's not exactly something we can work with. So let's not do that. Undo out of that. Close it. Okay. So first time, not so great. And that's because we're giving it no config whatsoever. So if we want our config in there, we're going to start off by just doing the config here, and we will eventually extract this out. So the mode is going to be development. Webpack has gone through 4 versions, just so you know. So at the moment, the config changes with every single one of them. So therefore, I don't feel so bad about missing some stuff, or not always remembering 100% how all of these things come together. All right, so I like TypeScript files. So we're going to have this resolve in here. Okie dokie, we want rules, module rules, this one right here. So let me just take a moment, I guess, to explain how this works. So Webpack will go through all of the different files and it will do certain things with them. Unless it's told explicitly, it won't always compile files properly. If it doesn't know what to do with a TypeScript file, it will just render it as is. Unfortunately, this one has no type, so it wouldn't just crash yet. But by using a proper loader, it allows us to actually do the right thing. So let me put in a little bit of TypeScript just to sort of demonstrate my point, I guess. Foo string bar number. I don't like foo bar. I always forget. It's like the last resort when I can't think of some better name for things. Anyway, so with that in app.ts and without these loaders, you don't like it because it does not like the word interface. So we may need to add an appropriate loader to handle this file type. So that's what this stuff does. It tells it that for any file with TS on the end of it, or an X, this is a regex, and we'll talk more about them later, but essentially it means that the file ends, that's what the star character is, the file ends with TS and optionally an X or not. And that X is for React specific stuff, but we'll get into that later. So if we run gulp scripts now, the files list in tsconfig.js is empty. Oh. So tsconfig does not exist, and apparently it needs that these days. So we better make ourselves one. tsconfig is a config file for TypeScript. And to start off with, I'm just going to do that. It's probably going to be wrong and it's still going to break. No, I didn't like it. The type number is not assignable to type string. This is interesting because it just picked up an error in our code, or an assumption in our code. And I can tell you exactly where that assumption is. It's line 13 right here. So there is an assumption that we should be able to set text content with counter, but counter is a number. But what if we did .toString? Now suddenly, there is no error because it realizes that we are definitely doing what we intended to do, which is give it a string. The interesting thing about that is potentially we could do this, and that would also quieten the daemons and let it know that we know what we're doing. Yeah. And that's because when you add something to a string, JavaScript knows that everything that comes out of that as a result is going to be a string. But anyway, let's get back to this. So it already picked up an error, and then it put it somewhere. So we're going to see where that somewhere is. Okay, it's still a mess. Still a mess. And it's always a differently named mess as well. So we probably want ourselves an option of some description. Something that tells us what the name is of the file that comes out of it. And if I look over at my documentation here, yeah, output is the one we want, right here. So we're going to put output file name as app.js. So that file name is going to be app.js. Okay, so that worked for us. You will have noticed that even with almost no code, it takes almost a second. That's not going to be acceptable down the track. So we're probably going to have to do something about that, and pretty quickly too. But anyway, let's us check out and see what code got output there. All right, so there's a bunch of code there, and it's not very sightly. So I might take a moment just to prove that it runs first, and then after that, okay, so we can see that that code runs. So after we've proved now that it runs, what we're going to do is just take a look at that bundle file so we can talk about it. So that was in build web app.js. All right, so here's that bundle. And it's got an awful lot of stuff in here. Most of this is all the things required to make the app Webpack as a concept work. It essentially makes little containers for all of your different modules so they can't accidentally pollute each other with their variables, otherwise known as closures, which I did mention last trip through, but we'll get to it again. And then here it does this eval thing, and I'm not sure why it does this eval thing. That's something different in the old TypeScript, but I imagine it's because of the source maps. At any rate, this is where our code lives, and we'll start to see a lot more code in there soon. And that's Webpack in a nutshell. Like, it bundles all our code together. It has all these mechanics for sort of hiding them from each other, and allows to build JavaScript in a larger environment. We're not done yet with our TypeScript setup, but seeing as we're about to close the hour, we're going to sort of finish off here. So what I'm going to do is, I think, make myself a commit here. So if we look at the status, yeah, we added ourselves some config really roughly. That webpack.config.js is empty, so I'm not going to be able to do anything with that just yet. But yeah, if we take all of that and add it, so now we've got everything. That's all of our changes. Now we've got ourselves a very simple TypeScript setup, and we will get more into detail with that next time. What am I doing? All right, git commit day 0b. Set up TypeScript, basic TypeScript Webpack. Yep, that was our commit. That was pretty much what we did. So off we go. We'll push that on. So as always, you can follow on with every bit of code we do. It'll all be on the GitHub repo that you'll find at github.com/weareoffcider/weekends web app. And what we're going to be doing, we're going to be picking up next Friday, well, in 2 days, 2 days time. And we'll probably just keep on keeping on with our Webpack, and then we'll see where we go from there. I'm hoping to mostly have sorted out Webpack by the end of that hour. So we might be able to get to writing some real code after that, but we'll see how it goes. I want to make sure that the toolkit is set up properly before we really launch into things. That is pretty much it. There's only one viewer on at the moment, so would you like to ask any questions? Or otherwise, we'll call the stream at this point. Well, that's it. Well, for anyone who's watching, thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.